Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to CounciLIVE, your live stream source on the most important topics and issues in early childhood education today. I'm Savannah, your host of CounciLIVE, and today I'm honored to introduce this week's special guest speaker, Dr. Fran Cleland, who will be speaking on physical development in pre-K settings. Physical is one of our CDA core competency functional areas because we believe that movement and physical development are integral for all early childhood education. Dr. Cleland is a professor at Westchester University and the former president of SHAPE America. She's been preparing health and physical educators for over 29 years and has presented at numerous conferences across the globe. She holds a PED in motor development and adapted physical education and an MS in physical education from Indiana University, as well as a BS in health and physical education from Purdue University. We know you will learn so much today, so without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Fran Cleland.
Well, hello everyone. It's my pleasure to be able to present all about the preschool mover to you today. I am Dr. Fran Cleland. I teach at Westchester University, which is on the east side of Pennsylvania near Philadelphia. I've been here for 27 years, and I work with teacher candidates who are interested in becoming health and physical education teachers. Prior to being at the university level, I taught K-12 health and physical education in Indiana, Virginia, and Oregon. And I've been very heavily involved in SHAPE America. That's our national association, the Society of Health and Physical Educators. And I highly encourage you to be involved in it too. All educators are welcome, and they have just a plethora of resources. So let's jump right into this. In fact, we're going to be watching a video, and it's about jumping.
Jump you're going to do, Luke? A tuck jump. What type of jump will Logan do? A sideways jump. What other jumps can you do, boys? Show me a different shape in the air. Let's start a backward jump. Did Mr. John teach you a star jump? Another sideways. What's a star jump? What does that look like? That's a backward jump. Did you forget what a forward star jump looks like? Like a letter X in the sky. Oh, stretching those legs out. Luke, let me see you make a big wide star. Beautiful. Good choices, boys.
All right, so you can see that that's in a very ideal kind of setting, in that we had a preschool at our university a few years ago. It has since stopped being at the university, but we had access to preschool kids, so I had them come down so my college students could learn how to teach not just K-12 but also preschool children as well. And I'll tell you more about that lesson plan and show you a video also in a few minutes that covers the expanse of the entire gymnasium, so you can see what it looks like to set up learning stations. So the guidelines for all Americans have recently been revised in 2019, and the guideline for preschool children is that they should be active through every single day to enhance their growth and development. And in fact, if you look up the physical activity guidelines for all Americans, they say 60 minutes a day, every day. And that involves moderate to vigorous physical activity. So we'll talk about free play, we'll talk about setting up more structured learning situations. But again, in a daycare environment, whether you teach at home or whether you're within a school facility, it's very important to give children these frequent physical activity breaks throughout the day. And I'm sure some of you use Gold Noodle and other now software apps that encourage movement and dancing all day. So a little theory here. We really want children to breathe hard, and we don't get very scientific with young children. So any type of fitness activity is just intrinsically embedded within a learning activity. It's not taught like an exercise class by any means, but we do want activities that make them breathe harder, increase their heart rate for cardiorespiratory fitness, and also for stronger muscles, and they're still growing. So we know that it's really, really important. And physical activity has direct correlation to brain benefits. So it enhances children's memory, their executive function, their ability to process information. The big one is attention and overall academic performance. And there's a high school in Illinois that did a study many years ago, and they still have what they call learning readiness physical education. So before, maybe they take one of their harder subjects such as math or English, they actually take an activity class right before that focuses on cardiorespiratory endurance, and it really enhances their academic functioning. And that book is called Spark, S-P-A-R-K, if you're interested in reading that book. John Rady wrote that book, R-A-T-E-Y. All right, so this shows a brain after a 20-minute walk and a brain after sitting quietly. And we know preschool children don't naturally sit quietly. Anyhow, I am very familiar with what the learning environment looks like. There's a lot of movement embedded within the typical classroom environment for young children. So I just hyperlinked, and I'll take you to this. This is on the Shape America website. It gives you a little bit more information about the benefits of physical activity, and that's where I got the effects on the brain. And there's additional readings on this website. So you can see that the brain has actually become colorful, and it's lighted up now, and it's got more warm colors. So we actually stimulate our brains, even from short periods of exercise. Now, I studied motor development when I was a graduate student. I went to Indiana University in the state of Indiana, and my mentor, David Gallahue, created this metaphor for motor development. So as an early childhood educator, you probably took specific courses in child development where you really focused on Piaget's stages of cognitive development or Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. While as a physical education person, we need to really understand cognitive development and social development, but we also need to understand motor development. I'm just going to annotate here a little bit. And your preschool children are in the rudimentary phase, if they're around 2 or 3, or they might actually start in the fundamental movement phase, because the ages 2 to 3, 3 to 5, they're very subjective. So motor development is related to a child's age, but it's not dependent on a child's age. So when I teach my teacher candidates, we look at videos of 3-year-olds who are playing adult forms of golf or tennis. So it's possible to go through these stages and phases when you have encouragement, a lot of instruction, and opportunities to learn. So in the reflexive phase, that's when the primitive and postural reflexes primarily govern movement, and there's developmental milestones that I'm sure you're familiar with. And then you really have to house-proof your house during that rudimentary phase, because children are beginning to climb up on cupboards and jump off of couches and do all sorts of wonderful things. And those first 2 phases of development are highly governed by genetics, but also by affordances in the environment. And an affordance, and you're going to see a video of my grandchildren taking advantage of an affordance. An affordance is something in the environment that has action possibilities, and it's perceived by the mover to use a certain way. So I always tell my college students, I used to be able to, believe it or not, straddle parking meters. I would walk downtown with my mother to go grocery shopping, and I would run and jump over a parking meter. Well, I'm a little older now, and so that affordance no longer is an action possibility for me, because I could never do that anymore. But what's really critical is that in the fundamental movement phase, and that involves the children that you teach, they must have instruction to learn all the fundamental movement skills. They have to have structured environments with feedback from a teacher, lots of encouragement, and lots of very colorful, stimulating environments. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So bottom line is you can learn fundamental movement skills such as locomotor skills, skipping, hopping, jumping, galloping, leaping at an initial stage. But in order to get to the mature stage or the proficient stage, you actually have to have structured learning environments and a teacher who's knowledgeable about that content. So first, children are obviously just going to do free play, and then gradually you'll see in the videos I'm sharing with you today that you do what we call a limited freedom lesson plan. And by the way, my second year of teaching at James Madison University was with preschool children, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So I studied with Jane Kruger, and I learned a great deal. So if you are interested in learning more specifics about motor development, this is an excellent textbook. Jackie Goodway teaches at The Ohio State University. John Osmond teaches in Indiana, and David Gallahue is since retired. However, this is a great resource for really looking at when children learn the fundamental movement skills. And fundamental movement skills include locomotor skills, which I already mentioned, skipping, hopping, galloping, leaping, sliding sideways, running. And then there are also manipulative skills, kicking, striking, bouncing, catching, and throwing. So there's basically 12 fundamental movement skills that children really focus on in pre-K all the way through grade 2. In the fundamental movement phase, this is a description of what children look like and how they move. So a phase is a bigger chunk of time, and the stage within the phase is a smaller chunk of time. And quite honestly, scholars use a lot of developmental terminology. Piaget uses stages, and sometimes some authors use periods of cognitive development. So stages, periods of development are all a little different semantically in the literature. But between the ages of 2 and 3, it's when children are making their first observable and purposeful attempts at throwing or kicking. And quite honestly, it's just through playing. Have to have those kinds of equipment and opportunities, playgrounds, lots of different things around the house. And it is dependent primarily on growth and maturation. However, you do need affordances in the household or in your yard or in your learning center. So during this stage, children are just gaining control of those muscles groups. So they're rhythmically a little uncoordinated. In most manipulative skills, there's a beginning, middle, and end. As physical educators, we call that preparation, execution, and follow-through or recovery. And lots of times parts of those skills are missing, and that's okay because it's developmentally normal. And oftentimes the movement is either too big or too small. So that's what an initial stage mover looks like. An emerging elementary stage now begins to need a little bit of instruction because now we're trying to learn more about how do I start that underhand throw? What's the middle part? What's the execution part? Does my chest face my target or does my side face my target? So they're beginning to get more consistency, but when we're in the emerging elementary stage, we learn everything in very stable, closed environments. There's not much movement. There's no unpredictability. So when children are throwing, they throw to stationary, very large targets. So when you look for preschool physical education equipment or movement equipment, everything has to be sort of supersized. The opposite is in effect when they throw, because in order to throw properly, particularly an underhand throw or an overhand throw, you have to have a ball that fits into your hand. So the general rule of thumb is throw small but catch big. So you start catching maybe beach balls or balloons, and then you gravitate to smaller objects to catch with both hands. Still, you don't want to use partners or groups because we think about their social stage of development. Maybe they're still a bit egocentric. So we want them to be working maybe sort of in parallel play with another child, but not directly in a structured way because they can't determine force and direction. So the ball's sort of going to go wherever it goes until they get all of the skill cues and they're able to perform all the skill cues for a particular fundamental movement skill consistently. And the third stage is the mature stage. And again, you could have a 3 or 4-year-old that's at the mature stage because their parents or caregivers, for whatever reason, they've had a lot of opportunity for instruction, practice, and encouragement. You could also have a 6th grade child who doesn't have a mature stage overhand throat simply because maybe they've always done swimming or soccer their entire life, and they haven't had an opportunity to be familiarized with that particular motor skill. So this is my neighbor, Max, who's now 13. This is when he was 7. And I'm going to show you what a emerging elementary stage jump looks like, and also what an initial stage, because his brother is only 4. So this is a really good example of the stages.
Okay. All right, you can go back and do it again, Max.
So he's preparing.
Okay, one more time, Max. And how old are you, Max?
7.
7. Okay, do one more time because it got blurry. Go, Max, jumping. Beautiful. Okay, Spencer, your turn.
This is easy.
Spencer's 4. Beautiful, Spencer. Do it again. Come back and try again. See how many stars you can jump to. Push. Good job. One more time. Go back. Push. Jump, jump, jump.
All right, so as you can see in a stationary jump, both of them lacked an arm preparation, because in a mature stage jump, you swing your arms way back, you bend at the knees, push off of both feet, and land on both feet simultaneously. And an initial stage mover sometimes might take off of 2 feet, but land on one, or one foot takes off before the other. So again, these stage characteristics or skill cues are available in textbooks. So you can see that they haven't had a lot of instruction for a standing long jump. And Spencer's only 4, so why should he? He's still just exploring the world. So when I wrote my textbook, it's a 2017 textbook, there were no pre-K standards and outcomes. So I created them. You really want your preschool children to develop emerging elementary stage characteristics of the fundamental movement skills. So standard 1 is all about the psychomotor. It's all about the physical and learning how to do it. And so if you're a preschool teacher or a physical educator, you're going to observe children do these different activities within age-appropriate lessons. So that's the first standard. And so your lesson plans are going to be based on all of those fundamental movement skills: jumping, skipping, hopping, striking for manipulation, balance, things of that nature. The second standard is more about cognitive understanding. So you want children to understand the movement framework. And I have a visual of that for you. So all movement is derived from what we call the movement framework. It's sort of like the ABCs of physical education. And you want children, if a teacher performs a skip, really at this age, you want the children just to be able to recognize, oh, that's a skip. And some children might actually be able to tell you what a skip is. It's 2 step hops, step hop, step hop, step hop, step hop. So, but quite honestly, your assessment is going to be, can they recognize the proper skill? They still may not be able to physically perform all the skill cues for mature stage performance because they're at that emerging elementary stage. So the second standard is more about understanding, what am I learning and why am I learning it? And how do I change it? It says recognize basic movement concepts. That's the movement framework. Well, I can skip. That's what my body does. I can skip along a curvy pathway in space, or I could skip rhythmically to a piece of movement or music, excuse me, and I could skip beside a friend. That's relationship. So body is, what does my body do? Space is, where does my body move? effort is the timing, the quality of my movement, and relationships with objects or with others. As we move on to standard 3, the standard 3 is health-related fitness. I'm currently on a task force to revise these 5 standards, and I do believe we're going to be looking more at well-being versus fitness in the future. But children in preschool do not need structured calisthenic exercises. They don't even need that in elementary school, period. They need really interesting lesson plans that are exciting to them and engaging, that help them increase their heart rate, that help them maybe do locomotor skills for a longer period of music each time you engage in play. So again, when you're looking at health-related fitness, it's more embedded within an activity, and it's within an age-appropriate lesson. The 4th standard is sort of our affective standard, and it's about really just demonstrating personal and social responsibility within a movement setting. So for your children, it would be learning how to follow safe practices, or being able to cooperate, like, I want the yellow hoop, no, I want the red hoop. Being able to say, okay, I'm good with whatever color hula hoop I have, or I'll play with this friend for a while. And so it's all about those social skills. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with CASEL's social and emotional learning website. So also on Shape America's website, there's a crosswalk between the physical education standards and all of the outcomes for social and emotional learning, because that's a very critical piece of our education scene these days. And the 5th one is more of the intrinsic, like, do I really love to move? And when I'm not in school, am I interested in moving? Now, with young children, that may not be under their control. If you live in an inner city environment, if you live in an unsafe environment, if your parents work really late, there are a lot of different confounding factors that contribute to children's ability to be physically active outside of the home. It might take a little bit more effort by caregivers to go on field trips to parks if you have to physically drive to one. But I know a lot of communities are really trying to establish a culture of physical activity within the town or the city. I recently traveled to California, and very close to the San Diego airport, just down the block, a couple blocks, is this most magnificent playground. And so we went there with my grandchildren, and it was absolutely amazing, all the movement choices that they had. So those are our 5 standards. And when you design a lesson or an activity, even if you have an activity station within your classroom, you would use these standards that I linked through Shape America to help you design a standards-based lesson. So you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how are you going to know if your students achieved your lesson objectives. So on every physical education lesson that my teacher candidates write, they always explain to the kids, this is what we're going to do today. And then the teacher either explains why, or they ask the students why. Why do you think we should be doing this? And how will you know if you learned anything today? That's the assessment piece, whether it's informal observation assessment or actual formative assessment. All right, so now we're going to take a look at designing a learning experience. And I had the opportunity to teach a movement course to early childhood educators at the College of Philadelphia a few years ago. The main thing is just giving kids opportunities to move. And again, those are what we call affordances. So they're movement possibilities within the environment, but how a child uses those movement possibilities is based on their confidence and on their skill level and on their growth as well. So this is in my textbook, but I also have a feeling you'll be seeing this. So when you design learning environments for preschool, it is equipment intensive. It is not cheap. So you might have to be doing grants or fundraisers, something of that nature, because preschool children in particular need a lot of different sizes and weights and textures. So for equipment, you can see that you can vary it by its size its width, its length, its weight, its height, its texture, and motion. So when you're designing a learning environment, you want to consider that. The next is relationships. Do I want the children to move alone, with a partner, a small group, or a large group? Well, we know that we want children to maximize practice opportunities. Physical education hasn't always been age appropriate, hasn't always been developmentally appropriate. In fact, we took some of the information from early childhood education and in the 70s and 80s designed developmentally appropriate practices for physical education. So with preschool children, you might do a learning circle at the beginning of a lesson with a small group where everybody participates in the same activity together for 3 to 5 minutes. Then you're going to have stations set up in your movement space. And I'll show you that learning environment in a moment. And finally, the conditions. So you've got space to work with as a teacher, and you've got time. So again, children, for the most part, preschool children move very, very fast, and then they stop moving. Very, very fast and stop moving. So they don't do anything for long durations of time. Also because of growth and development and interest and skill level. So when you're not real skillful, it takes more energy to perform a skill. So when you're designing your environment, you definitely want to have appropriate distances from targets, because if you're too close to a target, for example, on an overhand throw, the skill cues will not be elicited. So you have to be at least 10 feet away. And then if you're too far away, your children aren't going to be successful. So you can vary direction, pathways, level, and trajectory. And so when you're teaching catching, you know you're going to have a close distance, a large object, and a pretty horizontal trajectory, because a vertical trajectory, something coming out of the sky, is a lot harder to catch. So here is the awesome movement framework. This is from an article I wrote in 2019. And there was a man named Rudolf Laban, who is from Germany. He was an architect, but he was also a choreographer. And he created this movement framework by watching women work in an airplane factory in World War II. He defected to England. And so you can see locomotor, non-locomotor shapes, supporting weights with different body parts, moving with isolated body parts. So all of the body awareness is here. And here's space awareness, effort awareness, time, and relationships. So this is the movement vocabulary for all K-12 physical education and for preschool physical education as well. So if you have an older child, if you put soccer in the middle of that black circle, you could go to body awareness. Well, what do we do in soccer? We run, we sprint, we throw, we dribble with our feet. So every movement form can be described by this framework. So this framework is invaluable. It's just very valuable. All right, so finally we get to see my grandchildren who are now, I'm trying to think how old they are, 7. This is when they're probably 3.
CATTELL.
Non-stop action. Go, Max. Be very careful.
They are fraternal twins.
These are called affordances. Climbing affordances.
REDECCA.
Go, Ben.
So Becca is CCA.
Way to turn around, Max. That was very safe. Good jump. Can you jump off? Not yet. Woohoo!
So you can see in this environment, you do have to make sure that your household is a safe household. So there are videos on YouTube that shows children climbing out of their bedrooms over 2 gates. Obviously, they're probably somewhat manufactured, but again, you want to make sure that you have your equipment or your play obstacles appropriately placed in your house. All right, so here comes the entire gymnasium. When we had this preschool on my campus, they would come over once a week. Now, again, this is sort of a utopic ideal situation because we have a lot of equipment. We have 2 preschool teachers and we have college teachers. So if you were going to do this, you might need some assistance or parental support. Obviously, you probably are not going to have a gymnasium, so you would not have as many people in the environment. So this is called a limited freedom lesson.
There's two little boys participating in a limited freedom lesson, crawling through the tunnel. Boys, are there other ways to move through the tunnel? Can you figure out other ways to move your body besides on your knees? Could you crawl like an alligator with your knees off the floor? How could you crawl with your knees off the floor? That would be, oh, there you go. That's like an alligator or a bear. Or a frog. Show me a frog, Logan. Oh, good frog. That's different ways.
I'm going to stop this for just a moment because I have gone through different teaching periods in my life where I've also done a lot of interdisciplinary instruction. So every station, it would be a letter station or an animal station or a storybook station. So I'm sure all of you as early childhood educators are experts at that. So you can layer on academic themes within the movement environment. So you don't just have a sterile movement environment. We did not do an interdisciplinary lesson for this particular video. And now you're going to see me correct the college students. So I'm a little gruff, so I apologize for that.
This is a limited freedom lesson plan. Laura, I don't think she should go over the top. If she can't do it by herself, then she shouldn't do it. Let's not go over the top, sweetheart. Let's go around the side, okay? But good effort, good effort. There are multiple stations for the children to choose to play at, and if they go to a station, they have to put a smiley face on their card, and if there's already 3 smiley faces there, they have to choose to play somewhere else. Start over here. Top of the cheese wedge and then do their forward roll.
Okay, so you can see it does require a little bit of knowledge about the different fundamental movement skills because children are short and it would be really a lot of pressure on their neck if they did not stand on top of that cheese wedge. So even with older children, learning rolls on a cheese wedge, again, is developmentally appropriate and costly because that cheese wedge probably costs over $500. I would imagine. Go on. So let's take a look at some equipment. There's a wonderful equipment company in Baltimore, Maryland. They still exist. It's Gerstung, Gersten. It's originally from Germany, and they have all this wonderful indoor playground equipment. So it's heavy, and you would probably need to have a place to store it unless you have a movement space that you can keep it set up all the time. Some of it is made of wood, some of it is made of pretty sturdy metal. And you can rearrange the learning environment so it's different every time children come. And we have this equipment at Westchester University, and we use it for developmental gymnastics with K2 children that still come for physical education to our university. So again, it's costly because it's very well made, and you can add on to this over time. So what does it afford? It's like an indoor playground, climbing, hanging, jumping, balancing on body parts, and traveling. All of this is very good for muscular endurance. And muscular endurance is one of the 5 fitness components. Cardiovascular endurance is a fitness component, flexibility is a fitness component, and muscular strength and endurance. So again, you're not going to have kids do push-ups, that would be boring. You're going to have them do climbing and hanging. It's much more fun than doing a push-up. Some of the smaller pieces that you might need for direction so that you can be free to walk around and encourage children to do a movement correctly. They need directional cues. So there's footprints, there's arrows, there's plastic hands that you can get. All of these can sort of guide your movement area. And these are for jumping and landing, as you saw earlier in the video, and they're expensive. We have 2 sets of these in the university, and I think each one was $750. However, again, over time, you can collect equipment, and you also might be able to actually build something. If you have a parent that is a really good carpenter, you can put foam on top of it, but you always have to make sure that legally and liability-wise, you're making something that is sturdy and is able to be used by several children. I'm a fan of obstacle courses, so I love to make obstacle courses that children can move under and over and around, and they learn all of those prepositions. Carpet squares are really good, and you can usually get those free. You just have to make sure that they don't slide on the floor. Tunnels are great to crawl through. You can use great big refrigerator boxes and paint them all wonderful colors, or you can spend the money on a nylon one. Parachutes are always magical with children and afford locomotor skills, and there's a lot of different cooperative skills in games that you can do with parachute. I love jump balls. They're another piece of equipment that just, intrinsically children just gravitate to because it just naturally encourages muscular endurance and dynamic stability in a very fun manner. All right, so you are probably very well versed in Piaget and Erik Erikson, so we know that children learn best through informal free play. They don't need structured physical education classes at the preschool level. That's why I showed you what we call a limited freedom lesson plan. And usually you don't do whole group activities. In fact, I'll tell you a story. My second year of teaching at James Madison's lab school, I tried to do just that. I thought 4-year-olds were just like kindergartners. Little did I know they were not. They just needed to play, and they just needed to have a movement environment and do incidental learning. So I was like, okay, everybody go stand inside of a hula hoop. Let's all jump in and out of the hoop. Well, some of them didn't want to stand inside of the hula hoop. Some of them didn't want to jump. So I found out very quickly from my mentor at James Madison, Jane Kruger, who wrote a movement education book, that you set up opportunities for movement. And then the teacher roams around the space and, encourages children, maybe gives them some feedback. Please take off at 2 feet, or make sure you bend your knees when you land. And you might just do circle time at the beginning or at the end. So very limited whole group activities. Large group games are a big no-no in my world because they don't offer opportunities for practice, not enough opportunities for practice, and oftentimes many children are not included. So implicit instruction or exploration is the way we design preschool movement education lessons. And just as I said in the bottom of this paragraph, while children are exploring, teachers can verbally comment on their discoveries, right? So you have to be able to set up a movement environment that elicits jumping. I remember one of my teacher candidates did the best jumping station. She got bubble wrap, and she put it on the floor and taped it down with duct tape. And then she put fall leaves on top of it and then cellophane stuff on top. So the children were actually popping bubble wrap while they were jumping. And it was like a fall theme, I believe. It was very creative. So you can really create movement opportunities that are interesting to children. So here's a mini lesson for a parachute. So you would have, this might be a group activity that you could do at the beginning of a lesson. So you have a small parachute, and when children hold a parachute, they hold it overhand. You can teach left to right and right to left. You can lower it and raise it, which is great for muscular endurance of the arms. You can turn sideways and hold the parachute with one hand and walk or gallop or skip to music. Again, walking to the tempo of the music, turning opposite directions and switching the hand, and then the tummy toward the parachute, grasping the parachute with 2 hands and sliding sideways in a circle. So using the movement framework, what you need to do is look at the piece of equipment that you have and go, let me look at body awareness. Okay, what can I do with that equipment that's safe and interesting for the children? So I go to body awareness first. So you can see this is manipulative because they're using their hands and they're using a parachute. There's some relationships because they're next to other children. There's some effort if you play music because you're moving to the timing and beat of the music. And then obviously the body awareness focus here is locomotor skills. So now we're going to go to some references. All of these are on human kinetics. All right, so that's one, and that's focused on preschool children. The next one is all different interdisciplinary ideas and looking more at literacy, so reading, writing, and I know Rhonda Clements very well, and I'm sure it's just a wonderful book, and this is also on Human Kinetics website. This one is looking at enhancing brain development and physical activity games. And the last one is my book. There are only probably 3 different elementary physical education textbooks across the country. This is the only one that includes preschool. It is a 2017 reference, so as you well know, things do change, but there's a whole chapter on how to consider preschool children's cognitive development, their social development, and their physical development, and how you then use that information to design the learning environment. And then there is several different preschool movement lessons in this book. So with that being said, that is the end of my presentation. I am delighted to share more information with you. I'm sure you'll be able to get my contact information at any time. And with that being, I will have Ms. DeMarco take over.